So, actually, before we get to this, I thought the overview was here.
Three columns there. This is what we're looking for, right?
Did that guy's work? Okay. The overview. Isaac and Rebekah endure 20 childless years until their prayers are answered and Rebekah conceives. She experiences a difficult pregnancy as the children struggle inside of her. And that's a quote from the Torah. God tells her that there are two nations in your womb and that the younger will prevail over the elder. Esau, as we call him in the Torah, emerges first. So he is biologically the older one. Jacob is born clutching Esau's heel. Esau grows up to be a cunning hunter, a man of the field. Jacob is a wholesome man, a dweller in the tents of learning. Isaac favors Esau. Rebekah loves Jacob. Obviously, both parents love their kids, but there seems to be a certain gravitational pull, one-on-one. Returning exhausted and hungry from the hunt one day, Esau sells his rights as the firstborn to Jacob for a pot of red lentil stew. In Gerar, which is in the land of the Philistines, we find then Isaac presents Rebekah as a sister out of fear that he will be killed. This was a family tradition Abraham did twice to Sarah, by someone coveting her beauty. He farms the land, reopens wells dug by his father Abraham, digs a series of his own wells. Wells was a big deal, right, in the agricultural society. Over the first two, there is strife with the Philistines, but the waters of the third well are enjoyed in tranquility. Esau marries two Hittite women. Isaac grows old and blind and expresses a desire to bless Esau before he dies. While Esau goes off to hunt for his father's favorite food, Rebekah dresses Jacob in Esau's clothes, covers his arms and neck with goat skins to stimulate the feel of his hairier brother, prepares a similar dish, and sends Jacob to his father. Jacob receives his father's blessings for the dew of the heaven and the fat of the land, and mastery over his brother. When Esau returns and the deception is revealed, all Isaac can do for his weeping son is predict that he will live by his sword, and that when Jacob falters, the younger brother will forfeit his supremacy over the elder. Jacob leaves home for Haran to flee Esau's wrath and to find a wife in the family of his mother's brother Laban. Esau marries a third wife, Mahlat, the daughter of Ishmael. Okay, so the way they laid it out here, you have my mouse?
Yes, sorry, do you need it?
Okay, thank you. What?
Do you need it?
I just want to go down to the next one thing. So they jumped in. If I was structuring this, I would have structured it a little differently, but we're stuck with this. So, and they do a good job in general. This really has, on the face of it, has nothing to do with the Torah portion. It says, what if we are accused of a wrong that someone else committed? May we tell the truth? Today's discussion is going to focus a lot on what we call in Jewish law lashon hara, speaking negatively about someone. Now, why is that? So before we get it, I want to get into the Torah portion part. In the Torah portion, the Torah says God, that Isaac became old and his eyes became dim. And on that, there's a primary commentary in the Torah, who was a great rabbi in France in the 11th century, known as Rashi, or Shlomo ben Yitzchak. And he says that the reason that he became blind was because that was going to lend itself. He gives several reasons why he became blind. And one of them said that would lend itself to the drama we're going to read about, where Jacob was able to fool him and wrest the blessings from him, even though he wanted to give them to Esau. And today's discussion focuses on something that, because the Rebbe once asked, the Rebbe was a student of Torah, but of Rashi specifically, and Rashi only comments in the Torah when there's something he thinks is not understandable to a child. He says, I'm only here to be able to make a 5-year-old child understand the flow of the Torah. He's a great genius, and so he writes some other stuff and says, this is for kids. really smart kids. But if he jumps in, it means there's something that's difficult in the Torah portion. And the Rebbe said, what's difficult to understand when someone gets old and they become blind? They may have seen their own grandparents that way. I mean, it jumps out at the Torah portion to say, oh, the reason that it became blind is because this would make it easier for the drama. And what the Rebbe said, pointed out, and we're going to go into this now, is that prior to this, years before, God had promised Isaac that he would have a long and healthy life. So he said, if a kid studied that last week, he's going to say, hey, now blindness is not part of being healthy. So there must be something to this. So Rashi says, okay, you're right. Here, God had to do that because he was setting up the drama. Now, the other question that would be is, so why couldn't God just tell Isaac, you got the wrong kid? Your wife has better clarity, and you're dealing with the wrong kid. And for that, this is where we're going to get into the idea of God. The overarching idea is about why didn't God tell Isaac something negative about his son? So we're talking about the general idea now of speaking negatively, and then we'll come back, circle back to understanding the Torah portion. So
is a blessing obtained under false pretenses truly a blessing?
That's what I said. That's a great question, and I said, thank God they don't dwell in it today. But it's a great question, and you have to say, because God's in charge, right? That this was all part of. Rebecca wasn't fighting the reality, even the spiritual reality, and the spiritual reality was that it belonged to Jacob. But this it's a very complicated story morally. But like I say, I'm skating a little bit today. But here the question is, it's a simpler question that we're focusing on is the idea of negative speech, and so just as a backdrop to that, what if we were 6 months ago, we were hanging out and we were all part of we're friends with Sam, what's his name? Bankman-Fried. And I heard, one of us heard that there's some monkey business going on. Something's not right. So 2 scenarios. One is that one of you says to me, you know something? I just got an inheritance. I think I'm going to invest with Sam. The world says he's a genius, right? And he's gangbusters, making a lot of money. Is it okay for me to say, I heard there's monkey business then? And scenario number 2 is that actually we were just sitting in Starbucks. No one's invested in him. Say, you know, I saw Sam on Good Morning America. He's really top of the line. He's doing great. Am I allowed to say, yeah, I don't know. I heard some monkey business. There might be some monkey business there. Those are 2 different things. First one is you're potentially protecting someone from bad investment. The other one is it's a Sunday morning Starbucks, and I had something to say. I know there's nothing positive that I'm injecting there. Nothing constructive. Maybe true, not constructive here. Okay. So here we said is another one. What if we are accused of a wrong that someone else committed? Maybe we tell the truth. Now, what is the truth? It's along the same lines, but it's someone says, why did you do that? And I didn't do it. David did it. That's so unlikely. But so there's either for me to say I didn't, which is the truth. I was saying I didn't, he did it, which is also the truth. But that I have to out him. I should have said the other way. Someone accused David of doing it, and he didn't do it, I did it. And does he have to out me, or just say the truth, which is that he didn't do it? So let's get into this now. Text 1. Next one is from this coming week's Torah portion. It says, and it came to pass as Isaac grew old and his eyes grew dim, and I mentioned this before, and he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, my son, and he said, here I am. So he calls, it's, dad's getting old, he wants to talk about the legacy, and he says, it calls the older twin, and he said, here I am. Now, what does Rashi say there? Why did how is it that he became blind? He actually gives three different possibilities. We're focusing on one of them. And text 2 is so that Jacob would collect the blessings. In other words, this is all part of God's plan. Jacob has to fool his dad. In order to fool his dad, he has to be blind. And that's where this whole thing is supposed to end up. And therefore, he became blind. So as I said, the follow-up question is why does he have to become blind? Why can't God just tell him, you got the wrong guy? Text 3. There is inserting here. We learn from this how carefully we must avoid malicious speech. Isaac was confined to his home for 57 years. He was blind for a long time, just so that ill not be spoken of a Jew and apostate Jew. If this applies to Esau, in other words, he didn't want to tell Yitzchak how his son would end up, that he was not the right guy. If this applies to Esau, it most certainly applies to Jews after the Torah was given to Mount Sinai. At that time, God said, I am God, your God, telling every Jew that I, God, am your God, source of your individual strength and vitality. Now, so first of all, here he was talking to a room full of Jews. We're not supposed to talk negatively about anybody, Jew or not Jew. But what he's saying is here, he said, I am God, I'm God, you're God. I am the source of your individual strength and vitality. We're all God's children. How is it that we can speak negatively about someone?
Easy.
Sorry?
I said it's easy.
So we have exhibit A to my left. Who said it's easy? Okay. And I'll let those on Zoom to guess who it was who said that. It's easy. Text 4A on page 106. Now look, it's common, it's very common. As a matter of fact, and Rabbi Scott just brought up an important point, that it is very common. Talking negatively. As a matter of fact, the Talmud says that there are three things that even really evolved people don't escape every day. And one of them is at least a hint of Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara means speaking negatively about somebody. Now, and we're going to explore a little bit more about what that is, and maybe you'll see more why everybody does it a little bit. Most people are.
Why we all get together for the Jewish holidays. It's the basis of conversation.
Is it the only time to do it?
Good start.
Text 4A from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. He writes, oh, 1 second. Sorry. Oops. No, sorry, they didn't keep up with this. Okay.
I don't understand
You don't understand
I
what?
don't understand the correlation between Isaac and his dim vision, his dim eyes,
Yeah.
and Lashon Hara. I don't
okay.
see. I don't see that.
So
what one has to do with the other. How?
okay, so I want to explain something because Scott just asked the question. I want to make sure that it's clear for everyone, including Scott.
Including the dim.
The way Jacob was able to get those blessings was because Isaac was blind, and he was able to dress up because his brother Esau was very hairy. He put goat skins on his arms, and therefore, when Isaac felt him, he said, "Feels like you. This must be Esau," and he got the blessings. Rashi had the question. Before we have to go to anything, but to get to the end of it, the question is, why did he have to go through all this? God, because Rashi told us God, that's the reason God made Isaac blind. In order that he'd be able to be fooled, and Jacob can get the blessings. Because without that, he wasn't going to give it, he was going to give it to Esau. So the question is, why couldn't God just, and the Talmud asks, why couldn't God just tell Yitzchak, you got the wrong guy. This kid is not going to be your future when it comes to the monotheism. It's going to be Jacob. And the reason the answer is because he didn't want to speak negatively to him. He didn't want to speak negatively about Esau to his father Yitzchak. Didn't want to speak Lashon Hara about Esau. That's why God didn't spare the whole thing. We could have, we have 53 Torah portions. We could have had pretty much 52. The whole, without this whole drama of having to take the blessings. Just tell him this is you don't. This is not the kid. You're betting on the wrong horse.
How did Rebecca know?
Because she was a woman.
Exactly. That's just point the thing. Just point that mention that.
That's it. That was you were setting it up. You got it.
Because women have an intuition that men don't. Period. And it's written in the Torah and it's known. That's why a woman completes a man, because men have certain qualities that women don't have. And women see things that men don't.
And
That's
men-
why men need a woman.
And men have the wisdom to say yes to that. That's correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
Is there a word for blindness, or is it just, or is the interpretation dim of
Vision. Yeah. Okay.
and
Here.
couldn't that have meant something else?
Yeah, it could, and people go there, but from the context definitely means physically blind, and there is a word for blind. The language used here is not that; it means his eyes dimmed.
He wasn't completely blind. He could see shapes.
I'm not
Because he was able to see
suggesting
him.
that. I'm suggesting that he wasn't
That
blind.
his vision was dimmed.
There was nothing wrong with
That
his
is-
vision, that he was dimmed,
That he was like dimmed in his head. You mean?
perhaps.
Okay, but we don't see it that way. That's not the history as we have
No pun intended.
it. Okay.
You said it.
Okay, so here, speech is what holds society together. Speech has something, there's a communal need for proper speech. Anthropologists have argued that language evolved among humans precisely in order to strengthen the bonds between them, so they could cooperate in larger groupings than any other animal. So we need to be able to communicate with each other as for communal needs. What sustains cooperation is trust. This allows and encourages me to make sacrifices for the group, knowing that others can be relied on to do likewise. If you think about it, if you're at work in a group, and one person comes over to you, tell you something negative about a coworker. So first of all, excuse me. Thank you. Thank you. You got blessings.
You shouldn't hold that back. You can dim your vision.
Imagine someone comes over and says something negative about a coworker. So first of all, now I may see that coworker differently. So there's a division. I may see the person who told me something differently, because now I know there's someone who talks behind other people's backs. Who knows what they're talking about to me, to the next guy? So this idea of speaking about each other negatively is seen it, and this is something the Talmud talks about, is like it says, they don't have it here, King David's army, which was very successful. They went through a very unsuccessful phase, and they asked, why is that? They said, because of gossiping, there was backbiting going on amongst the group. It weakens the bonds, it weakens communal bonds, it weakens group bonds. This is precisely why Lashon Hara, that's a negative speech, is so destructive. It undermines trust. It makes people suspicious about one another. It weakens the bonds that hold the group together. If unchecked, Lashon Hara will destroy any group it attacks, a family, a team, a community, even a nation. Hence, its uniquely malicious character. It uses the power of language, which is such a blessing to us, to weaken the very thing language was brought into being, to create, namely the trust that contains that sustains the social bonds. So our communication is a powerful tool for connectedness, and we're misusing it by speaking negatively about each other to do the exact opposite, to weaken our bonds. Thank you very much. Before I forgot. Okay, so now that's Hebrew. Right? So the next one, then. Little. Okay, great. So here is something in 4b. We have something from the previous Rebbe, and it's. I want to be able to talk about it a little bit. I don't know how understandable it is on its face. It says here that the founder of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Zalman of Ladi, once offered an insight into the passage. This is a Torah passage. It says, "Do not accept a false report." And first thing it says, don't accept a false report. Not accept a false report on the face of it means that a judge or a judicial system, a judge in a court should not accept. Be careful about not about witnesses that are not getting false testimony. That's on the face of it. He said it's talking about each other. Don't accept when someone speaks to malicious speech. In this case, say it could be false, but actually maybe it could be true. What is the meaning of the rest of this passage? Because the passage goes on to say, "Do not place your hand with a wicked person to be a violent witness." In other words, not to join, because that in Jewish law you need two witnesses in order to establish a fact that's going to be punishable. And this, it says, don't join, even if you're an honest person, don't join up with someone who's not an honest person as a second witness. And here, this with a Hasidic twist, we're not talking about two witnesses, but actually us with ourselves. The Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Zalman, shared what he heard from his teacher, the Maggid of Mizrach, the preacher of Mizrach. In the name of his teacher, who was the founder of the Hasidic movement, the Baal Shem Tov. And I'll explain this when we finish reading it. In addition to our weaknesses, we each receive a special strength from above when our soul descends to earth. When two witnesses testify to actions that we committed under the influence of our weakness, our strength is removed, and this is a form of violence. Accordingly, the passage can be understood thusly. Do not accept a false report. It means do not accept malicious speech, so that you did not place your hand with a wicked person. The wicked person refers to the evil inclination. Do not join with the evil inclination, accepting malicious speech just because together you will be two witnesses. To be a violent witness means to violently steal another's goodness and inner strength. So let me explain this. Number one, the belief systems, we all matter. And we're all put on earth with souls that are equipped to accomplish things. We all have strengths. We all have challenges, which means sometimes we have weaknesses. That's across the board. Everybody's like. We have, but we want to be able to use our strengths to be productive in the world. And we want to try to compensate for our weaknesses, just be aware of them, admit them to ourselves, and move forward. The more our weaknesses are more dominant and pronounced in our personalities, the more they eclipse and they end up blocking out our ability to do the good things we can do. They end up sapping the strength of our goodness because we're emphasizing more, and what's more emphasized in us is on our weaknesses. So what he's saying here is like this. The way Hasidic thought sees us psychologically is that each of us, there's the I inside, there's like the internal traffic controller, and then we have impulses to the good, to the negative, but I should make the choice between the two. What Rabbi Zalman was saying is that if I have an instinct to speak negatively about someone, that's just an instinct. I don't have to do that. If I, the traffic controller, join with my negative instincts to talk negatively, it's two of us now. In other words, conceptually, it's two witnesses. And when we speak, and this is the gist of it, if we speak negatively about someone, they may not know. But first of all, we've created a certain perception. And people often live up to people's expectations. So that person may not know. This is just on the purely psychological level. If you and I, two of us standing outside and we spoke about someone we're about to meet inside and we, in a negative way, and this is what we're expecting of them, of course, they have the power to be who they are, but we do impact each other. And when you kids for sure, but it was everyone, when we project expectations, people often live up to those expectations. On a spiritual level, that was psychological. On a spiritual level, also the idea is found that when we bring it out, we speak negatively about someone, they may not know consciously that we spoke negatively about them, but what we just did was that we focused on their negativity and we made it harder for them because we brought it out more into the atmosphere. And that's what he's talking about over here. That there's the idea of we can, our speech is not just, sticks and stones, break my bones, whatever. Actually, speech can be powerful because it changes perceptions and it could change someone's self-concept. Thanks a lot. Okay. So, going to a really the beginnings of this in Torah thought, because speech is a complicated topic. It's not just don't speak. There is actually no verse. Don't speak lashon hara. Don't speak negative thought. It's an amalgamation of a bunch of different things. And the first one is don't talk about people. What is don't talk about people? If we're just sitting and talking, and we're talking about a mutual friend, and they say, it does very well. It's cash business. Cash business could be totally benign. Our cash business, it has implications. So it's not untrue. I didn't say he's a thief. I didn't say anything. But I did say something. And was it necessary? So really, following Torah's thoughts, it would be a much quieter world because we say things that are constructive and constructive with people, and just sharing information about other people, because that's called a peddler. That's what you take for money, take to someone else. That's what a peddler does. So I was in there. I was just at his house, and something. The guys got two Ferraris. I don't know. It's really interesting. He's a barber. I said it admiringly. Right? It's spreading other people's business is being a peddler. Not necessarily you lie. And that's one of the reasons that the Talmud says no one escapes it, because it's really, it's easy to say, I didn't say anything. Well, you kind of said something.
Is there lashon hara when you're talking within a family unit, husband, wife, and children?
It's all that's part of what we're talking about now with Yitzchak. The question is why. So if there's a family member who's done something wrong, and I'm speaking to someone in my family who can help, who can support, who does, that's important. If it's or someone who might be hurt, say, I don't know, just in case if he asks you to go into a deal with him, don't. But if it's doing it just because you can't believe what I just heard.
Well, you have an obligation to a family member.
I know.
Well, an obligation for what? But what if there's nothing? What if I just heard something? A family member in California was not babysitting my kids, not my sister's kids, and really has no bearing on my life, and there's nothing I could do to them. And I just said he was just accused of whatever, of the molesting something. So I shared with my sister. What was I getting? What was the point of sharing it with her? I found out something interesting about someone we both know. Shocking. But was there a point to me telling you?
Unless your sister has a child.
That's something else. If he's babysitting for my sister,
Exactly.
right? But it's in California, they're different. It's measuring our speech for constructivity, for the constructive quality.
Dave calls it juice.
Yeah.
It's true.
And it's part of it. Text 5a. Oh no, okay, so there are actually, so did I do 5 already? Do not walk in the peddler among your people, you shall not stand, it's not stand by the shedding of your fellow's blood. I am God. And text 5b, Rashi there explains, gossip mongers are called peddlers because those who instigate quarrels and spread gossip visit the homes of friends for the purpose of seeing or hearing something negative to share with others, because it makes them interesting. I got something to say. Maimonides writes about this. Who is a gossiper? One who collects information and goes from person to person saying, this is what so-and-so said, or this is what I heard about so-and-so. Oh yeah, that's nothing. This what, you know what she said about you? That's right. That's poison right there. Just looking to, unless it was something that was negative, if you need to know about what this person thinks because you're about to walk into a meeting with them or whatever. I mean, it's possible that's constructive. Otherwise, just spreading disunity is like, this person. I was with him and he said you're ugly. What's the point? This is what I heard about so and so. Even if the statements are true, they can destroy the world. And there's a much more serious sin than gossip, which is also included in this prohibition, which is what we call lashon hara, sharing deprecating facts about a colleague, even if they are true. And if it's a lie, it's a bigger problem and a separate problem. Talking about even if it's true. Someone said to me, to use that other thing, we're friends and we were taking out, and someone said to me about a mutual friend of ours, that guy, it makes me nervous every time he opens his mouth. And I repeated to the friend, how are we going to be a group? How's that going to work? And for what purpose? But he didn't say it. It's true. Imagine if I made it up. Much worse. Text 6. This is a Talmudic piece, which is similar to what the case I brought up before about me and David. Now, this is in the Talmud, times of the Talmud, there's in Jewish law, there's always been a very strong emphasis on legality and on documents, especially contracts. There's a lot about Jewish contract law going back more than 2,000 years. One of the things in the times of the Talmud was what translates as a tied document. What is a tied document? The way they used to do it apparently was they would do it was written on parchment, and then they would sew it over, either to close it or to close part of it, and to close a piece, and then sew it over together to close it all together. So you could open it up, see part of it, and conceivably not see all of it because it was sewed shut. So they didn't like that because you got to see the whole document. Don't mess with documents where someone may not realize and may not have the mental acuity to say, one second, I'm not going to sign this. I got to see everything. The tied document was brought before Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda examined it and observed this document is missing a date. Perhaps the date is hidden between the ties, suggested his son Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda untied the document and found the date where Rabbi Shimon predicted it would be. Later, Rabbi Yehuda looked disapprovingly upon Rabbi Shimon for writing a tied document. So why? We know we don't like it. Why would you write such a document? Rabbi Shimon defended himself and said, I didn't write it. Rabbi Yehuda Chayata wrote it. It wasn't me. I was just telling you where to find it. He wrote, the third guy wrote, which was true. The response from Rabbi Yehuda was, turn away from malicious speech. All you need to say is you didn't do it. I thought it was you, because you're standing here. Because look on. He said, I'm going to say, I'm not the one who wrote it. You're done. I didn't ask you who wrote it. I don't need to know who wrote it. So his response was, you went too far. You should have just said, I didn't do it. In somewhat along these lines, in text 7, there was one of the author of the Mishnah, the foundation of the Talmud, his name was Rabbi Yehuda, Judah the Prince, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. And as he got older, especially we were talking about the illnesses when he got older, and he had actually very severe intestinal problems. One of the things was that the smell of garlic was very, very, very troubling to him. So For example, Rabbi Yehuda the prince was once sitting and teaching when he smelled the odor of garlic to which he was sensitive. He said, whoever ate garlic, please step out. Rabbi Chia, who was one of the great students, rose and stepped out. And then, out of respect for Rabbi Chia, everyone else left. So the class is over. Because if Rabbi Chia is leaving, we're leaving. The next morning, Rabbi Shimon, son of Rabbi Yehuda, asked Rabbi Chia, are you the one who disturbed my father? Rabbi Chia said to him, there should be no such behavior among the Jewish people. He said, I would never do that. I just didn't want, someone was going to get embarrassed. So I walked out. So you'll think, you won't know it was me or that guy. Everybody left. It was okay. So we didn't have to embarrass an individual. Now, even if he knew who it was nobody's, that wasn't the point. The point was he wanted to spare, the situation was that the teacher couldn't go on with this. Someone was going to have to go out. He just figured it's better we'll meet again tomorrow instead of locating that individual who's going to have to walk out in front of everyone and be known as the garlic guy. And he wasn't. It wasn't his business to share that. Now, text 8 along these lines, talk about God. Can God talk Lashon Hara? Before we get into 8, there's when Joshua brings the Jews into the land. The Torah ends with Moses being buried in the desert, and the Jews are about to cross over into the promised land. And Joshua was the new leader, and he led the Jews in conquering the land. They had, in one city, they had a serious defeat. And Joshua was very troubled because God had said they were going to be successful. So he asked God, why was it? What's going on? I said, someone among you, because God had said, don't take any loot from any booty from the cities you conquer. He said, someone took loot, and that's why you're getting unsuccessful. So Joshua said, okay, who? Joshua said to God, Master of the world, who's the sinner? Who's that person? I'll take care of it. God said to him, what am I, a gossiper? Go figure it out. Now, God actually gives him in there scripturally, you see, God gives him a process by which to find out. But they said, that's your job. Why are you thinking about my job to go tell you something negative about? Okay. Now, there are exceptions. Let's look at text 9.
Why would that be text 8?
Did I say text 8?
Yeah, why would that be text 8? And I thought that it was God who told the whole premise for Lashon Hara was
But God didn't tell.
Jacob and Esau.
But he didn't tell Yitzchak that Esau is the bad guy.
Right, but that was the whole premise for it. So
Right.
why does it not occur until text 8? It's like, that's a no-brainer. It should be text 1 or it's a given. God doesn't speak Lashon Hara because that was the whole premise for Lashon Hara.
Because
it being a sin.
I laid out an overview of the entire lesson, so I jumped the gun.
I have to leave the room because I smell garlic.
Text 9.
Thank you.
Whoever can save another and fails to do so transgresses the commandment. Do not stand idly by while your brother's blood is at stake. We have to be careful. We can't. We walk a fine line, and I've shared this before. Remember, many years ago, someone who no longer lives here was a builder, and I just knew, and he was a friend. I just knew that all of his partners, because I knew a few of his partners, all his partners have been in court with him. I just knew that as a reality. I knew that because they're from the partners. And I didn't get into this stuff. I was much younger, but I just knew that someone who was very connected to us here. I was in his office. I was also in real estate. He said to me with some joy, he said, "No, I'm going to be doing business with that guy because he figured it's Chabad." And I said to him, I hope you're not doing that for us. So I said, no, I'm doing it for me. I just wanted you to know. So I said, okay, I don't need to teach you about real estate. Just do your due diligence. Don't. Chabad's not part of this deal. He said, are you trying to tell me something? So I said, I'm trying to say, I hope that your business senses are not eclipsed by our friendship. I love that. I just don't, I don't, I want you to be who you are, and you're a smart business guy, you do what you do. He did the deal. He ended up in court. And when he told me, this is probably 2 years ago, that he said that, we're in court, he said, but Rabbi, I know you tried to warn me. Now, could I have said to him, I know he's in court with his partners? I didn't think that was the fair thing to do. First of all, it's public record. If I knew it, anybody else could find out. And second of all, it's like I'm drawing some conclusions and connecting dots. That wasn't my place. I just wanted to make sure that he understands to keep his antenna up. But why did I say anything? Because he's a human being. I don't want him to get hurt. So there is, in the laws of speaking negative speech, there's a very important operative principle that when it's constructive, it can help somebody. And here it's a potential victim, then keeping quiet is spilling blood. You can't do that.
So you couldn't have gone a step further and said, don't do business with that guy.
No, how could I say it?
You could have said.
Maybe he didn't ask.
He didn't ask me if he should, but nobody, I think that would have been overreaching because I don't know enough. I just thought maybe he was right in all those lawsuits. Maybe he's a victim of 4 or 5 unscrupulous
Right, said, if it smells like a pig and it walks like a pig, it's pig.
I would be.
Usually people use a duck.
Yeah.
I don't want this anymore.
I would be careful with that. And here is like, God forbid, if I knew someone was accused of child molestation, but I didn't know for a fact, and anyone I knew was taking them for a babysitter, and I said, well, I don't know for a fact, and I shut up. That's terrible. That's terrible. Someone could get hurt because I decided to be holy and keep my mouth shut. I have to say something. Now, I gotta say, this is what I've heard, and I'm not stated as fact, but you want to be honest, but you can't just keep quiet.
But if that person's in California and you're in New Jersey, then there's no reason for you to say anything.
Except to my friends in California. Whoever can save another and fails to do so transgresses the commandment to not stand idly by while your brother's blood is at stake. This also applies when we learn that non-Jews or Jewish informers are conspiring to harm others or setting a trap for them, and we don't identify them as the danger. Mendy is writing this at a time when the Jews were always under the threat of very often Gentile governments that were oppressing them, and sometimes they had Jewish informers helping them. We need to be able to talk to them and tell them. It also applies when a Gentile aggressor who has a complaint against another, and we can appease the aggressor on behalf of this, the other one failed to do so in all similar instances. What he says is, let's say in Mendy's time, so he's in a Muslim land, and he found out that the Muslim governor or someone in charge is planning to hurt him. The best thing is go to that Muslim official and try to settle it. To avert the problem. So then if you avert the problem, then the would-be victim doesn't even know anything, and that's fine. So even there, before we go and we warn someone, we want to see if you can work with the person you're talking about. Just if there's something you can do. If I heard something about someone doing child molestation, there's nothing I could do in talking to them about it. But sometimes you say, I heard you spoke to my friend John about investing in your company. I'm a little worried about it as a friend. Is this okay? Maybe I can avert the situation. I was talking to Sam Bankman or whatever. before I go spread something about a third party, try, maybe speaking to the party themselves is best. But it's not flat.
I have a question.
Sure.
So this person, let's assume that, he was a child molester.
Yeah.
And you know that that person is a child molester. You're not gonna talk Lashon Hara to
You know
someone
it,
else.
you know it or you heard it? You know for a fact.
Either you know it or you feel it, or I don't know. There, okay, let's say you know. Is it, I guess, do you go to the authorities, like the police or stuff? If it's someone Jewish, would you
In-
go
in-
to
in
the?
today-
or what do you do
in-
today?
That's I brought up child molestation, it's a big topic. But I would say, since I'm glad you asked it, I guess, because I mentioned it myself. 30 years ago, if you went to, at least in the Jewish community, the observant Jewish community, if you went to a head of a school and said, I heard that the security guard was hanging around with little kids and touching whatever, the head of the school would call the security guard and talk to them. And maybe the security guard might say, it was true, or it wasn't true, or I cry, and I'm gonna behave myself. And then the head of the school would probably say, I settled it. It's okay, we had an understanding, I don't want to hurt him, I don't want to take away their livelihood, and move forward. Even if we knew there was something, something actually happened, and he called the rabbi and said, the rabbi of the community said, what do I do now? Say, don't call the cops, let's keep it in-house. That would happen 30 years ago and back. Today, everyone says, don't call anybody but the cop. Go straight, because there's been too much damage done by trying to be nice to people who are hurting others.
Because you can't trust them if they have an illness.
It's an illness, there are, unfortunately, a lot of people walking around with terrible baggage on their soul from being hurt by adults when they were kids.
Right.
When people could have stopped it, but they thought they were stopping it. They didn't want to make too much of a turmoil, get them into trouble. And
Sort
that's-
of like, the stories you hear about the priests and the churches, so the same thing with the rabbis. and
Yeah, I thank God, I don't think it's at that level, but it has come to a point, and I've watched it happening over the past 20 years. Everybody, rabbis, whatever, they'll say, don't call me, call the cops. Just even if you have a suspicion, call the cops. Let the professionals take care of it, because it didn't work with rabbis taking care of it.
Mendy?
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't know, confused, or I just want to clarify something. 5A,
5A, yeah,
you're not
Peddler.
walked about as a peddler among your people?
Yeah.
Right? And what we just read in, what is it, 9 on the top of the page.
9.
It seems like.
Yeah.
There was a difference in your explanation in terms of what I'm thinking is, if you're just going around talking about people
Two different things.
as opposed to actually knowing about a potential transaction, is that?
There are, as I said,
Where there's a distinction?
it's an amalgamation of different behaviors. The beginning of the behavior, just don't talk about people, even if it's not negative. That was that verse. That was the starting. Now we're talking about actually telling someone something negative about someone else in order to protect.
Okay,
It's a different,
all right.
yeah,
Just
different, yeah,
That's
definitely.
what I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure, yeah.
Text 10a. This is from a rabbi of the late 1800s, early 1900s, who wrote a very famous book in the Jewish community, the Torah community. It's all about Lashon Hara, about negativity. It's known as the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim means it's from a scriptural verse of the person who desires life. Because in the Psalm it says that who is the person who desires life? Guard your tongue from evil. So he called his book, it's Chafetz Chaim, one who desires life. So, or Shmirat Haloshon, which means the guarding of the tongue. And 10a, what he writes is, when someone speaks ill of another, think the following. The story might be false. All right? So we're sitting here just hanging out, not much to do, we're looking at our phones, and someone comes in and tells us, our friend Jerry just did something negative. So in my mind, before I take that as fact, let's see, maybe not. I didn't see it. If it is true, even if it's true, the talebearer might have added a slight falsehood or committed a slight detail or altered the tone of voice in which the words are said to change the entire complexion of the story. That's what you get out of media all the time. It's a story, but then it gets altered by what you don't say, what you do say, and how you say it. So it can happen with people. At the very least, try to find the defense of perpetrator, assuming it was done in error. In other words, we don't know. What would we want for ourselves? And this is a guiding principle of behavior in Torah. Don't do to others what you don't like done to yourself. If someone walks into this room and guys are just hanging out and says something negative about me that I did, I would hope that someone would say, wow, doesn't sound like him, or maybe this, or something like that. Instead of just saying, wow, that's Mendy. You want to, don't just accept it. I don't want I would want what I want for myself. What I don't want for myself is people just accepting negativity about me without thinking it. Say no.
By the way,
Yeah.
The Shmirat Haloshon was translated into English. It's a very good book. I read it.
It's
It's
definitely it's I'm sure it's quite a bestseller. It's all over the place. Text there is a tradition attributed to the Baal Shem Tov. Tradition attributed to the Baal Shem Tov. When we hear an uncomplimentary report about a fellow Jew, even if we don't know the individual referred to, we should be deeply pained. For one of these two Jews is certainly in an unfavorable state. If what was said is true, he's in an unfavorable state. If it's not true, the talebearer is in an unfavorable state. We should be hurt anytime someone says something negative about a friend. Because if it's true, someone did something negative, and if it's not true, then someone says just spreading stories. Thanks a lot, David. Did I do it right? Yeah. Okay, text 11. Okay. Text 11. This is from the Talmud. Rabbi said, although we may not believe this kind of malicious speech, in which the talebearer seeks us to protect us from potential harm, we should nevertheless be wary. So here, what happens if, let's say I had said to my real estate friend years ago, I'd said, you're going to business with him? I think he's unscrupulous. Everyone I know who's dealt with him is in court with him. That would be wrong of me, I think. What would my friend who I spoke to, what would be his responsibility? His responsibility would not to accept it as fact, but to accept it as a warning sign. Be careful. So if someone tells me about, someone who I wanted to hire as a teacher, that they have a sketchy past, what it's telling me is, if it's someone I know, that I shouldn't accept it now. That's part of how I see that person, unless you can show me an indictment or whatever, a conviction. But it's a warning sign. Go to the next resume, because I got to be careful. But it's something not to accept it as a fact about someone unless I actually know it.
I have another question.
Sure.
So, and this I know did happen to a friend of mine. You have during the shidduchim, which is like the matchmaking period, where a friend of mine her son was introduced to a girl. And it was this matchmaker that introduced them. And this girl was bipolar. Now, the matchmaker never said anything to my friend. And my friend was very upset because it's only when they got married that her son realized that she was bipolar because she stopped taking the medication and stuff like that. They ended up getting an annulment or divorce, whatever, in Israel. But, her problem was she didn't understand why the matchmaker and the rabbi both said, since you didn't ask, we didn't have to say anything.
So
So I'm asking you, is there such,
I
exception.
think that I think it's terrible. And there are people living in misery. The matchmaking is part of the observant culture. And it's a huge responsibility. I know someone recently, and it's always sticky. Someone calls me either if I have nothing nice to say. I mean, I always have something nice to say. I might say I don't know the number. Someone who's related to me, who went through a difficult time mentally, and it's okay, but he's clearly impacted. And someone called me about this.
what do you do?
Just about the. I said, "Do you know anything about him?" So I know we're related to. Do you know anything else about him? And he said no. So I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. Find out about it. Call people who know. Call people who know him past 5-10 years. And then get back to me if you want to ask questions."
So what are those people supposed to do?
They
Exactly.
have to. I didn't. I don't know what they're going to say. They're gonna.
They called you, now they call somebody else, and you're kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, I wanted to get him signed, but because he's related. I didn't want to be the
The
one
one.
doing them, but I wanted to give them a single.
So you made somebody else the bad guy.
That's what it's
It's a type of peddler.
not. It's probably worse. Okay, we go. It's really, and I can understand. I can hear what you're saying. That I should have just been upfront to say that you might have to call that out. I felt uncomfortable doing that one. Because I don't. Actually, I didn't know why he was calling. Who sent him off? Another relative sent him to me. I wanted him to be aware that this needs investigation, and you really can't.
Yeah, family member, that's tough. I don't think I would be able to either, since I'm negative.
That's the easiest person to talk about.
No. When it's family, it's sensitive.
It is sensitive, but I can accept that was for the ducking. I mean, because God forbid, no one did tell. But then, yeah, it's on my hand. I hear you.
But if they're doing the investigation.
So just to make sure you're
yeah.
looking and
So in your defense, this guy jumped the process. You sent them back into the process.
That's something to the process. Yeah. So you don't know. Now the truth is, I don't see this boy much anyway. I couldn't know exactly where he's at. But it would be a miracle if he was back to where he used to be.
It's interesting that this rabbi in Israel, who's a big rabbi, and a lot of people follow him, said that if you're asked, you have to say the truth, but if you're not asked, you don't have to say anything. And that was a red flag for me, that now you have to always ask.
I have a problem with that, because you know something? I don't know who that rabbi was. But again, if the operating principles don't do it to someone else, what you want done to you, what does this rabbi want for his kids? When he's calling someone about a match for their kids, just to have this terrible thing going on, but
Any chance that he fought forward?
No, is there any mental illness?
She has. That's right. And if those people, if someone who didn't know ends up entering into marriage, you just spilled someone's blood. It's wrong. And I hear what you said about what I said, because if God forbid they went further, I mean, I was as blunt as possible, you gotta look into it, but.
And it's the same thing, whether it's like a babysitter or someone you know is doing something.
You have to think about what if it was you. Now. In talking about this, about the approach. So. The idea is, on the one hand, we have to be careful, we want to be honest, we want to protect. So what happens if I see something negative in someone? Am I supposed to ignore it? What about Isaac? He saw negative things in his son Esau. So why was he ignoring it? So let's look at text 12. It says, we're each commanded to love each and every Jew as much as we love ourselves. The Torah states, love your neighbor as yourself. We must therefore speak positively about it. So we want to try to accentuate positivity and not negative. In text 13, oh, 1 second, I'm sorry. Text 13, there is a general rule that the power of positivity, I don't know why it's, oh, okay.
Click on it.
One more.
One more.
Okay. The power of positivity is stronger than the power of negative. Accordingly, if speaking ill of others impacts them negatively, speaking positive of them must certainly impact them positively and to an even greater degree. When we speak of another's goodness and virtues, it certainly impacts them, strengthening and helping them in their work of self-refinement. We reveal and activate their inner goodness and hidden virtues. So speaking positively about someone, we're saying, is just what we said, we're speaking negatively, it's activating both psychologically and spiritually the negativity. Speaking positively enhances the idea of their own positive, maybe their self-image, and that idea out in the air of the world. So what does this mean as far as how I look at someone? Text 14. Oops. Judge not others, the Talmud tells us, until you have placed yourself in their place. This is from the founder of Chabad. He writes in his book, he says, if people are not behaving properly religiously, so he's talking to those who spend their days in a synagogue or in a yeshiva. So you're sitting a whole day with books, with a Torah, with teachers. So your options are limited. People out there in the business world are hanging out on a street corner. It's harder for them. They have more temptation. That doesn't condone a behavior, but it gives context to why some people choose to do things. Since in this case, what people are talking about, their physical environment causes them to sin. Obviously, the sin is their responsibility, but the physical environment draws them there. Their livelihood forces them to sit in the marketplace all day. They're among those who sit in street corners, selling stuff, and their eyes observe all manner of temptations, and the eyes tease, and the heart desires. Then the evil inclination burns within them like a bakery's fiery oven. As the prophet Isaiah wrote, he blazes like a flaming fire. Life is different for those who walk about little in the marketplace and spend most of their day at home. Even if they do spend their day in the marketplace, it is possible they're not as passionate by nature, since everyone's evil impulse is different. So what is he saying here? So you see someone doing something negative. It's a negative act. Yeah, you can't be blind to that. But then put it in context. You wouldn't have done it. First of all, maybe you don't have that instinct. Second of all, maybe you're surrounding it doesn't lend itself to that. But understand that people live different types of lives. So even if they're doing something that you're going to say is objectively negative, and it's true, it could be true. Let's say that's true. To judge them is not fair, because to judge their character, because how would you know? What choices would you make if you were in the place? Says you'd be any better. So there's a difference between looking and saying that is wrong, and let's say I see someone pickpocketing someone in Manhattan. That's wrong. Call the cops. Period. say that person is a lowlife, well, they did something that lowlives do. But the truth is, I don't know how we grew up. I don't know what the conditions are. That doesn't condone the behavior. But as far as me now judging that human being as human trash, it should shift things a little bit. Because maybe if I grew up the way he did, if I grew up in John Gotti's house, I'd probably be a different type of person, right? Rich, but you get different mores and values. Text 15. Judging others favorably is not just about not blaming our fellow. Rather, it also triggers the merits and virtues of our fellow. Recognizing their challenges helps us realize that they have lofty abilities sufficient to overcome such overwhelming challenges. This then is the inner meaning of the rabbinic dictum, judge a fellow favorably. When a Jew judges others favorably, it triggers and exposes their latent abilities, thus enabling them to overcome their challenges and end their shameful behavior. This is what Maimonides meant when he wrote that a Torah scholar judges everyone favorably. I just want to see something. No one's asking anything. It sings their praises and never speaks ill of them. True Torah scholars who judge others favorably ultimately transform the others' degradation into a merit. Observing their fellows' extreme challenges, they see in those very challenges the incredible soul powers that person possesses. Thus, Torah scholars speak only of their fellows' strengths, including those soul powers, and never about their degradation. So, if you look at someone, and you see that they're living a life that you don't think is the way it should be, if they have challenges, for a believing person, let's say that God, if I expect for someone who grew up in a very challenging environment, and the Torah still expects them to live a good life, that means they have that capacity. And that means that I'm not sure I would have the strength, because I didn't grow up in such challenging circumstances. I remember that I was talking about when Russians were coming out in one of the waves, and talking about how they come out, they know nothing about their Judaism, because all they know is what was stamped on their passport that they're a Jew. And I remember, and I was younger, I was probably a young teenager, and then I was saying, you look at that person, you see someone who knows much less than you. It's true, but you're going to see someone who had such challenges that you can't imagine. And that means that person has strength, inner strength you can't imagine. Growing up as a Jew in the United States is great. It's a blessing. It's easy compared to what these people are doing. So I remember it was for me. I was thinking, okay, look at them as people really equipped with a lot of strength, because look what they had to do.
I just want to mention something. My daughter is always complaining about one thing or another, school and exams, and Dave always tells her, God doesn't give you more than what you can handle. It's true.
Very sensitive, aren't they? Yeah. It's true. Okay, text 16. Here's something from the Rebbe, how the Rebbe saw people. There was a young Jewish man in Belgium who had enjoyed a relationship with a non-Jewish woman for several years, and then they planned to marry. He had pangs of conscience and went on a Sunday morning. The Rebbe used to give $1 for charity. And after he described the situation to the Rebbe, he said, the Rebbe said, I'm in love with this non-Jewish woman. The Rebbe responded, I'm jealous of you. What do you mean? He replied, why should the Rebbe be jealous of me? He says, every time a person is given a challenge, the Rebbe explained, it is because he is given an opportunity to advance to a higher level. The extent of his advance depends on the seriousness of the challenge. God judges each individual and says whether he is capable of overcoming the challenge he is given. Now look at the challenge you face. That's why I'm jealous. I've never been given such a challenge.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. That is amazing.
So how does that relate to Isaac? The way we see it is that, or the way it's being presented here, is that Isaac was, as Scott asked, maybe it meant Isaac was dim-witted or the dementia, whatever. We don't see it that way at all. He knew exactly who he was doing. He had a son who was behaving He wasn't doing the right thing. But he never gave up hope in his son. He's saying, I know the little Esav inside. I know I love you. You can do it. So the fact that God knew that Esav would ultimately not choose to do it. What was that? What was the purpose? It was Lashon Hara. It was like, what do you want? A father, you're not giving him any information, actionable information now, just like give up hope on him. He wasn't going to do that. But God wanted Jacob to take the blessing, so made him blind. But to tell a hopeful father who's harboring hopes that this kid one day is going to straighten his life out, saying, sorry, but it ain't going to happen. There's nothing positive about it. So let me see. First of all, let me stop the share. Does it stop sharing? Yes. Okay. Now I don't know how to. Let's see if this allows.
What are you trying to do?
I think
Allow. Did we get the right one?
maybe click on the mute all button again, see if that will unmute it.
No.
Yeah, I can't see from so far.
It says mute all, but it didn't say unmute all, but everyone's muted. Oh, actually, no, not everyone.
Let me just see if this is on. Hang on a second. No. Oh, so it's this one. It's this one.
Yeah, top. That's what.
And this is.
You have a course at the Rabbinical College and technology.
So, is there any questions? You can unmute yourselves. Yeah. Doctor, I can't hear you. No, not.
Maybe he's on mute. I don't know.
I think you're on mute. Yeah, you are. It says you're on mute.
Unmute.
Can you unmute yourself? What's up?
Can you unmute people?
No.
You can't.
I can't hear you either.
I don't,
They're all on mute. See the red.
Okay. All right. So, if there aren't any questions? No, I don't know how to get you unmuted.
You can't write, can you write something?
Or you can write in the chat box.
Maybe you can write in the chat box that everyone is muted.
We'll be here another 15 minutes.
No, they can hear me.
They're just,
He
People are
can't
just
hear
trying
you.
to.
they're on mute.
Oh,
See the
so you
red.
can't unmute?
leaning forward doesn't help.
Yeah, you have to.
Blink one for yes and two for no.
Closer to.
It says here you're able to unmute yourselves. You can't? It's not working? Thank God for technology. I don't know.
The people on the upper level are trying.
Yeah, they're saying that they're trying to mute and they can't unmute. You know, I'll do this. How about if I ask you to unmute? Jerry, I'm asking you to unmute here.
Yes, that worked.
Okay, so then I'm gonna. So,
We weren't able to unmute and we weren't the chat was disabled as well.
oh gosh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm asking everyone to unmute here.
That's why I was frantically sign languaging you.
Yes,
Yes,
first of all, there were times, Rabbi, I love you dearly, but there were times when your voice dropped off and you were giving an example, a long example, and we missed it. Give us a summary.
everything.
Okay.
Standing on one foot.
That's what the recordings are for.
That's right. We have a recording, but
But we're not going to hear the recording because the voice drops off and there's a lot of talking and there's a lot of going back and forth that we're not going to hear on the recording. So give us a summary if you can.
I think next week we'll try not everyone muted, so we'll work on that. But so I'm sorry for my voice dropping lower. I think the bottom line of it was we spoke a lot about speech and the prohibition against negative speech. And sometimes a speech, negative speech about people is for a purpose. It's to save someone aggravation or to save someone from getting hurt. But the bottom line of with Isaac was that because even God had said, so in one of the notes there, that God said, I'm not a gossiper. He didn't want to tell Joshua who had sinned and taken loot. So the way we see Isaac is that Isaac was very well aware of what was going on with his son. But he saw in his son tremendous potential. And he never gave up on that potential. And he never gave up on his son. So the idea of God telling him, what information could God have given him that would have made a difference? Was he going to tell him your son is hurting people and he's not acting properly? He knew that already. The only thing he could have told him is that he's never going to change. That wasn't, what was that going to accomplish? To take away this father's hope. So, and here, so therefore it was better in the divine plan for Isaac to become blind, to allow for this whole drama of Jacob stealing the blessings, rather than just go straight to the core and say, give up on Esau, ain't gonna work. That would have been, for God, using speech in a negative way.
Mhm.
Can you hear me now?
I apologize. Next week we'll try and
Lock the door before I come in.
yes. And we'll try and be a little bit more get you closer so I can see when you're getting locked out of communicating. And it's
You'll find the volume button here.
yes.
Well, thank you.
And we're gonna find a mute for those in the room, at least some.
Yeah, that would be good too, because sometimes the crosstalk back and forth just is very distracting, and it interferes with understanding what you're trying to get at. Some of the extraneous commentary on the sides particularly.
Okay, so we'll try and get this down. Doing a hybrid isn't that easy. Trying to transition back into a person, we will eventually we'll get there.
Sounds good.
Okay, be well.
Thank
Be
you,
well.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I'll see you on Monday.
Ah, God willing, yes.